If there was any show in Nickelodeon's history that was destined to have a video game, it was Danny Phantom. An action cartoon about a teenage boy with ghostly superpowers? Yeah, it's perfect for the video game space. So it's little surprise that Danny Phantom had so much video game representation despite the fact that the show only ran for like 3 years. Danny was a huge focus of the Nicktoons Unite series, has been a staple in basically every crossover game, and of course he got a couple of games focused specifically on him. Today we look at Danny Phantom's video game debut with The Ultimate Enemy. Surely they couldn't mess up a surefire slam dunk like this. Despite being significantly less successful than Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom might be the most revered Butch Hartman project, at least when it comes to critical acclaim. How much influence Hartman actually had on the quality of the show's writing is up for debate, but the show's entire existence stems from his success with Odd Parents. The Adventures of Timmy Turner had quickly developed into a big success for Nick, and the execs wanted to replicate it. They essentially went to Hartman and they asked him for more ideas. This is how the ball got rolling on Danny Phantom, an idea Hartman had been kicking around and trying to refine for some time. Nick was clearly all in on Danny Phantom as it made its debut on April 3, 2004 in the coveted Post Kids' Choice Awards slot. Despite that early excitement from the network, Danny Phantom only ran for 3 seasons, consisting of 53 episodes and coming to its end on August 24, 2007. The story behind Danny Phantom's early demise is shrouded in a lot of mystery and guessing. At the end of the show's 2nd season, Nick was beating their chest about it being the 3rd ranked property on all of kids' television. Hartman claims Danny Phantom was the casualty of a change in executives. The role of Nick President changed hands in 2006, and as new executives love to do, they immediately tried to tear down the previous administration. Around this time, Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron were also cancelled, so executive meddling sounds like a pretty accurate reason for the show's quick decline. One of the big frustrations from those who worked on Danny Phantom was that Nick didn't put its merchandising machine behind the show, something that seems quite stupid considering the premise. How do you pump up a brand new superhero action cartoon and not flood the market with action figures and other merch? The 2 Danny Phantom video games are actually quite unique in this regard. When you look back on the show, it doesn't seem like something that would have happened based on the way it was treated in other areas. Danny Phantom The Ultimate Enemy was announced on February 1, 2005, alongside a not yet named Lights Camera Pants, Tak the Great Juju Challenge, Nicktoons Unite, Barnyard, Clash with the Anti-World, and something I'd never heard of before, Evergirl. So this is news to me, but apparently Evergirl was a product brand owned by Nickelodeon and Viacom that was introduced in 2004. It's something extremely unique in Nick's history because it's not a TV show or movie. Hell, it makes their decision to create the Tak video game series before creating a show look completely normal. I'll go into it in more depth when I cover the Evergirl game soon, but needless to say, it's a very bizarre chapter in Nickelodeon video game history. So The Ultimate Enemy hit shelves on September 8, 2005 exclusively for the GBA. A number of wikis claim the game was supposed to come to the DS, PSP and home consoles, but this is just an outright fabrication from what I can tell. The initial announcement literally only mentions the GBA. Danny Phantom fans will immediately pick up on the fact that this game is based on the 2-part episode of the same name, which aired as part of the 2nd season. It actually had its premiere about a week after the game launched. Our good friends at Altron returned yet again for like the 10 millionth time on this channel. You all know who they are by now. They've developed so many Nick and Cartoon Network games and will develop even more in the immediate future. Honestly, for the most part, they've been pretty solid. All Grown Up Express Yourself is really the only game I intensely dislike from Altron. They also returned to develop Urban Jungle, which makes Altron the only developer who ever got to work on a standalone Danny Phantom game. Critically, I have no idea what to expect about Ultimate Enemy before playing it. only 2 reviews exist, a 7.5 from IGN and a 5.5 from GameZone. Danny Phantom and video games should be a match made in heaven though. With a developer like Altron in charge, I'm expecting at least a passable experience. Unsurprisingly, considering the platform it's on, the ultimate enemy is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, probably the best choice to utilize the strengths of Danny Phantom. Altron doesn't waste any time here either, dumping you straight into the action. For those of you who don't know, the Ultimate Enemy episode is about Danny becoming completely evil 10 years into the future. To start this game off, you get to play as the evil Danny, known as Dan Phantom here, which is quite a cool concept. You're completely powered up and destroy everything in your path. It's a nice taste of what's to come, and it's reminiscent of other franchises like God of War or Metroid, which is very famous for this, that tease you with their main character's full arsenal, only to have it ripped away and built back up over the course of the game. It's a bit of a trope, but it's a trope that I like. Unfortunately, I didn't like the combat. It's just so clunky and devoid of any fluidity that you want from a beat 'em up. For a game where all you're doing is bouncing from enemy to enemy, everything feels so stiff. Basic combat boils down to just mashing the B button constantly and then watching Danny do the same moves over and over again. To try and keep this from being completely dull, Altron tosses in temporary power-ups, special moves, and upgrades. It's a valiant attempt to breathe some life into the ultimate enemy. Power-ups are straightforward beat 'em up fare. Temporary boosts to defense and speed that noticeably help, but are hardly necessary considering the game never becomes difficult at any stage. There's also temporary weapon pickups that vaporize enemies much quicker than your normal attacks, but again, it's not a huge change of pace from normal combat, and the fact that almost every one of these is just some sort of variation on shooting a laser, yeah, it's quite poor. Where Altron does give the combat an ounce of intrigue is in the special moves Danny has access to. When the special meter is filled, you can cycle through a number of attacks like a screen clearing blast, a huge beam, or even some temporary invincibility if you're in a spot of bother. The only issue is, once you drain this meter completely for the first time, you'll probably have no idea how to fill it up again. Defeating enemies doesn't seem to do it, and there aren't any pickup items that restore it. It wasn't until I mashed literally every button that I discovered pressing select actually transformed you from Ghost Danny to regular Danny. While in your regular form, Danny's meter refills, but this comes at the cost of being slow, unable to attack, and overall very vulnerable.
You were such in a rush! You were such in a rush!
It's quite similar to what a lot of the Ben 10 games did with you reverting back to Ben, but those games at least explain the concept to you or downright force it upon you. Here, the way the system works is never explained to the player, and tying the transformation to a button that is rarely ever used seemed short-sighted to me. Additionally, Danny has the Fenton thermos on him, and he can suck up goop from defeated ghosts to refill his meter without going back to normal Danny. Again, none of this ever gets explained. There's certainly something to be said about not over-explaining everything to the player, but if you go that route, your gameplay has to seamlessly teach the player the mechanics. Altron tries to take Danny's unique abilities and use them to give a slight tweak to traditional beat-em-up gameplay. Danny can fly around, and his enemies in the show are usually ghosts, so a bunch of enemies are up in the air here. This gives the game a layer of verticality not always seen in a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but Altron drops the ball big time here. Danny can't fly. Instead, to fight these enemies in the air, you'll be constantly jumping and trying to smack them down. The closest Danny gets to flying is this mid-air finger guns move, but you have to stay in one place for it to work. It's just a poorly thought out gameplay idea. Having to jump to defeat 75% of enemies is not fun, and one of the big contributors to the combat feeling awful. Altron's other attempt at breathing life into the combat is the experience points and leveling up. Each time you beat a level, you gain experience points. How exactly you gain these experience points I have no idea because it's not explained. Once you reach a new level, you generally unlock a new attack that does absolutely nothing to help the combat branch out from being mash B to win. Even if Ultron did manage to perfectly implement a lot of these ideas and systems, I think the combat would still be suffering due to the fact you're just fighting the same generic blob ghosts over and over. They do introduce some new ghost variations towards the later stages, but they never really function any differently to the other ghosts. Aerial-based ghosts just float towards you, and ground-based ghosts will just stumble towards you. Nothing they do separates them from other enemies, other than the fact that they're slightly different visually. I guess the boss battles are kind of fun. They're super basic and button mashy like the regular combat, but facing enemies with some genuine personality and with distinct differences is a much needed break. Oh, and we also have obligatory shmup sections. These are just shoehorned in here for no real reason. They're ridiculously short and have clearly been tacked on to give the game a little something extra. The other main issue with Ultimate Enemy is its level design. The game just entirely consists of boring flat plains. Sure, they change the background of where you're fighting, but nothing ever truly changes about the levels. It's all just a palette swap. The only time it gets slightly interesting is the sections where you phase through walls, because it actually utilizes Danny's unique traits.
He's a phantom.
It doesn't even functionally change how the level operates, but even something as small as this seems huge when 99% of the game feels copy and paste. Levels are also insanely short. Most will take you 90 seconds to fly through, with some being over in 30 seconds. This all adds up to the game only being about an hour long, which is honestly insane. Even if you suck at this game, which would be pretty impressive considering how easy it is, you are definitely going to beat this in one sitting. I will give Ultron some credit though. They clearly realized the main game was lacking and packaged in some extra content to try and make this a worthwhile purchase. Like almost everything in Ultimate Enemy though, this is a well-intentioned idea that's poorly executed. Firstly, you unlock hard and easy mode difficulty selections after completing the game. Hard mode makes sense, but what use is easy mode after somebody has completed the entire game? Probably my favourite addition is the game's integration with a Burger King Big Kids Meal promotion. These toys came with passwords, and when you put them into Ultimate Enemy, you unlock one of 4 minigames. The minigames are all super basic, but I give them props for doing a pretty cool and unique promotion that tied back into the game. You've also got a boss rush mode you can unlock too. Ultron clearly knew that they had to supplement the main game with these side modes. But the most notable of all of these post-game additions is mission mode. If you beat the game and then select the same file, you'll find out that for some reason, Danny actually didn't save the day. This results in you unlocking mission mode, which is just you replaying the entire game, but having to tick off certain objectives for certain levels. I guess it would make a second playthrough down the line more interesting, but it's hardly something that would motivate me to play through the game again immediately. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the soundtrack. Yet again, we've got that trademark Ultron sounding OST here. Ultron are always pretty damn good with their soundtracks, but at this point I'm starting to get a little sick of them. Their music has a very distinct vibe and feel to it, and it ends up sounding like every other game they've produced. The music here isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but nothing about it screams Danny Phantom to me. Danny Phantom the Ultimate Enemy is a real bummer. What should have been an easy show to adapt into a game has ended up being clunky, barely utilizes the uniqueness of Danny and the show, and it's so devoid of main game content. This is genuinely one of the worst Outrun games I've played, and I get the feeling this game might have been lost in the shuffle of their ridiculous workload. 11 days after releasing The Ultimate Enemy, they released Tak the Great Juju Challenge on DS, and then in November they released Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi Kaznapped. Now, I haven't played the Great Juju Challenge on DS just yet, although it seemed to review okay, but Kaznapped is a really fun platformer. Just basing off that, it seems like The Ultimate Enemy didn't get the love and care it needed. I can only hope that when Outrun returns to the series with Urban Jungle, it massively improves on this debut effort. Speaking of Tak the Great Juju Challenge, that's the next game I'll be covering. Not only is this the final game in the original Tak trilogy, but this marks the first time Nick would release a Nintendo DS game. Additionally, the Great Juju Challenge still had a GBA version 2, meaning I'll be covering 3 games in one gigantic video. To make sure you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the channel, jump over to Twitter and give me a follow.